So I cleaned up a little bit. I got the floor a little bit cleaner than what it was. Grease, so much grease on the floor, I just couldn't stand it. I had to clean it. This right here is not going to be the finished product. It's just I kind of buttoned everything up, just kind of mocked it up, just sitting on top of nothing bolted in, just so I can get it kind of out of the way so it's not sitting on the ground while I have a chance to fashion a tool to work on these guys right here. Basically, I need to press fit out those wrist pins right here. Little circle deal right there. They're not press fit into the piston, but they are press fit into the connecting rod here. So you need to get those out. There's a tool that you can buy for like $100 or so, roughly, maybe a couple hundred. I'm not really sure, I guess depending on where you buy it. But I don't really want to do that. With me, I'm going to fashion a tool because I'm not going to use this every single day, or I'm not going to use this on a regular basis. I might use it a couple times to take these wrist pins out of here. So I got a 1/4" angle iron here, and I'm going to take that about 3/4 by 48 tube steel. That, some washers, and this. I think I have a solution for this that's going to work. I'm just going to get started working on this thing. I'm going to do some cutting, some grinding, some drilling, and hopefully we can make somewhat of a decent product here. Check out this little contraption here. Got me a long screw rod. That's a cut-off piece. The other piece is shoved down in the middle here. I'm going to show you how I'm seeing how this is going to work. Now, it took a little trial and error, and I started cut off pieces of the angle iron. I cut a hole in the center so that the little screw bar can go all the way through. Some big old washers. Got a 11/16 nut on there on this side, and I decided to use the vise in tandem. So as I'm turning here, the vise is going to be holding the piston. Seeing how that wrist pin can come out, because this tube steel is going to be, I got it centered on the wrist pin, and it's theoretically it's going to push the wrist pin through to right about here in the vise. I'm probably going to put another nut on the back here just to keep this nut stable, but I think we shouldn't have an issue. I think I'm going to be able to tighten this up slowly but surely as it's coming out, monitor, make sure this thing shouldn't wiggle. I mean, it's on there pretty good. Will it work? Probably, maybe. We'll see. So long story short, it did not work fully, and it was because I'll explain later on in the video why some of those pieces didn't work. Is mainly that center rod that I was using to the screw rod, it ended up snapping, so it wasn't really effective. I had to revamp something. So this is my second attempt, my second process, and I was actually able to press out 2 different pins using this vise method. However, this ended up breaking my vise in the long run, aside from a couple pistons, which aren't a big deal because I was replacing the pistons anyway. But upon breaking some of those pistons, I wasn't able to properly vise the piston, because now I didn't have anything to bite onto. So I ended up having to take the last 4 connecting rods and pistons to a machine shop so I could have them machine pressed out, just because I didn't have the means to do it with my vise. So this ended up breaking, like this process right here was somewhat effective at first, but ended up breaking my vise ultimately and a couple pistons. So I guess this right here would be my second failed attempt until I actually find out something that works. So moving on, I was trying to employ this other process by heating up the end of the connecting rod. And I'll explain this a little bit later as I show it to you and later on in the video. I I noticed that I was heating this up pretty well. I think I should have put a little bit more heat on it to widen it up more. This process right here where I heat up the end of the connecting rod and then take an ice cold wrist pin that, yes, I have a wrist pin that I'm taking out of the freezer, and then I take it directly out of the freezer and then I put it through the piston and through the connecting rod all at the same time before the wrist pin warms up too much and before the connecting rod cools down too much and contracts back down. This process, like I was saying, this was somewhat successful. I think the reason why it wasn't 100% successful was just because maybe it was my first time doing it, and my technique was, a little bit less than where it needed to be. But a couple of times you can see where I get the wrist pin almost all the way in perfect. But I'm using this process in tandem with the vicing that you'll see, not with actual vice, but like where I use a compression spring or a compression screw to push the wrist pin the rest of the way in. And you'll see that a little bit later in the video. Now, I'm not going to force it, but while the pin is as cold as it can be and the connecting rod is as warm as it can be, I'm going to set up my little tool here. Now, it's just barely just a hair inside of there, just barely holding on there. So, in theory, I'll be able to put this where it'll press in the rest of the way. So I'm gonna take my tool and put it on here where it's pushing against that pin. I'll set it up in the vise. Loosen up just enough. And once I got it on there, put my backing plate on. So yeah, this is all me right here. Just all the tools that I was fashioning and everything like that. That's how I cracked this right here. You could use the vise to compress some things, but in my application, when I was using a cheaper vise and everything, it just didn't hold up. So it ended up breaking the screw out of the vise. So this was a 5-inch vise. This broke because there was a screw that holds the tension plate in. I mean, you can't see it now, but basically it holds the screw seat in place as the screw is in the seat pushing in and out, right? As the vise opens and closes. Now, this thing got stripped out right here, bent and stripped out. So as the vise was under load and it was screwing in, the seat was slowly lifting up until it just popped off of there. So then it popped off of there, and then I tensioned it a little bit more, and since that screw was at an angle, it just popped off and just fell. So then I was just like, I looked around and I was like, what broke? Nothing's broke. The piston's not broke. What's going on? Did my tool break? Then I tried moving the vise didn't move, and I'm like, oh, the vise broke. So that'll tell you, like, yeah, you can get a vise to, work in some applications, some light compressing and stuff like that. But, I wouldn't, in this application, I'm not going to do it anymore, obviously, because I broke it, but I ended up fixing it. So it works now, but instead of a 5-inch vise, it's like 3 inches, maybe 3.5. So yeah, so that's where we're at now. So it does open and close still. We are making progress. We got this. We got one wrist pin in there already. One's about to go in. And we got all the wrist pins out. Whether I did or a shop did it. It's I got them taken out. I had to get these wrist pins taken out because by a shop, because once I had broken this piston, I didn't have anything really to bite onto, because where I was biting onto, it would have just pushed it back open even more, and it would have just broke it the rest of the way. I wouldn't have had any way to I wouldn't have had any backing device against, based off of my setup that I had before. I didn't videotape it, but I did a little bit. But there's a rag covering it because I was trying to protect it from the shrapnel of piston flying everywhere. So that's why I had to take it to these last. I got 2 of them out, but then I had to take the last 4 to a machine shop because they got a nice little press that they just got the tools, you know, and you know that's what they do. They use the press all the time. They're like, yeah, we just put it in there and pops it out. Probably like 2 seconds. You know, me, I'm over here struggling for like an hour or 2 because I'm doing it kind of a rigged up kind of way. But I'm feeling good about this one because I already got one in. It went in like butter, you know. So I was thinking that this one was gonna work. It looked good, but then as I was doing it, I realized that why it broke. But that's why I'm doing this. You know, I'm trying to be as safe as possible with it. Trying not to break anything if possible. But when stuff does fail, I always say hindsight's 20/20. Then that's when you can see like, oh well, maybe it was doing this and maybe it was doing that. But I think we're good with this one because I already tested it on once, and it worked like a champ. I gotta tell you. Last I was showing you guys, I was using this bar, which as you can see is this one right here is a lot skinnier than that one. I was using this one to press out the old wrist pins, which I got a wrist pin that's like halfway out here. I'm gonna be pushing that in here in a second. But what I'm doing is this one I'm actually pushing out. So this is you guys probably recognize one of these tools right here that you can get on like eBay or something like that. I'm using this just because it fits so perfectly through the wrist pin. And I got this tube steel that I was showing in the other video, but I cut it a little smaller, sitting right here. And then it fits perfectly over this and is pushing on this side. It's pushing on this side right here, right on the face of the wrist pin, this wrist right here, but on this side. So basically what I do is I got 15/16 socket that I'm tightening over here, and then this piece of angle iron that I cut off of this big angle iron right here, I drilled a hole in it so that this rod could go through here, making a little back plate, and this is going to be holding. I'm going to be doing all the turning here, and essentially as I'm tightening this up, the more I tighten it up, the more it's pushing that tube steel through on the face of the wrist pin until it comes out here, and nothing falls on the ground. It just pops when it's out, and then you can take it out. It worked out for me so far. I was actually able to press the new piston on the old connecting rod successfully. Now, you're probably thinking, you're looking and saying, oh, that's poking out a little bit too much, but that's just the way it is. It's just the way it is. I tested it, or I checked it out, like I put it kind of even right here, right about I made it about even, and then they stick out about the same on both sides. So that's about as good as I expected. That's piston 6 on connecting rod 6. I'm gonna be having this little notch facing towards the front. I made sure I looked that this dot was facing towards the front on the other pistons. So I just line them up notch to dot. All the connecting rods have the dot on the same side. So I know that the connecting rods are going to be going in the same way that they came out. I'm only using the vise, not for the vicing clamping power of it, but I'm using these bars here so that I can wrench the compressor screw rod against the backing and push the wrist pin out, because I want to flip the head. Because what I did was I put the piston on backwards, because I was in a hurry, because I was doing this torching technique, which I'm going to show you here in a second. Wrist pin was cold, and the connecting rod was hot, the end, and I pushed it in. It did push in about halfway, but then as the cold and the hot met, they both started expanding and contracting, and it just went in just a little bit and then stuck halfway. So I got it in halfway. So theoretically, actually, you know, it did work. Like this one right here, I pushed in with my finger, because this was ice cold and the connecting rod was hot, was blue hot, not red hot. Don't get it red hot. If you get your connecting rod red hot, you might as well just throw it away, because probably when you're pushing stuff in there, you're gonna warp it or whatever the case. But it does something to the connecting rod where it compromises structural integrity, and could cause like cracking. And then when the engine gets under load, it could potentially break inside your engine, causing damage to your crankshaft, pistons, and all kind of other stuff, you know, valves, all that good stuff. So I'm trying this stuff out because I've never tried that before. I see people say that it works. I've gone through multiple processes of trial and error to get to this right here. The problem with this one, because the problem with this rod that I was using before, it not only was it too skinny, which that wasn't the big thing. I think the bigger thing was it was looser on this tube steel. So there's less play in it now that I have this thicker screw rod in. This right here was skinnier. So maybe what it did is it started bending as I was pushing it, because there was play in the tube steel. Now, hopefully that didn't confuse you guys too much. But also, additionally, there's less play where the screw rod goes in. This is like almost an exact fit. It's almost like this thing was made to do it for this wrist pin. I don't know how I just found something that fit perfectly, and it seems to work perfectly. When I think also what I was doing is I'm still going to use the heating of the connecting rod, just right here, just this part. Heat that up, take my ice cold wrist pin. After I'm done heating it up, I do my best to push the piston, take the piston and put the wrist pin in, and just push it in as much as I can by hand, and from there I'll press the rest of the way in, because the connecting rod will still be hot as I'm pushing it the rest of the way in. By hand. Physics never ceases to amaze me. That's some science for you right there, brother. What you're seeing, other than my mess, is I have, you can see right over here, right there, got 4 punched in already. And it took me a little while, but it didn't take me as long as trying to build these different tools that I've been building that you already saw. And I wish I could have done what I just did and pushed that almost all the way in and didn't have to press anything in. Like, I didn't have to press anything with a vise. I'm going to, because it's still hot, so I'm gonna do it while it's hot. I'm about to get my fifth piston wrist pin punched in there right now. And since now it's most of the way in, cuts out a lot of work for me. Hopefully I can get the next one like that, just that easy. All right, so that last wrist pin on the 6th wrist pin, it actually went better this time, because I was able to basically do that technique with the torch and the ice wrist pin, and I was able to push it in all the way, didn't have to vise it at all. As you can see right here, I got all 6 pistons and connecting rods laid out, assembled, and the wrist pins are even, so that's good. And now I'm moving on to with my nice little Haynes manual, checking the piston ring end gap and checking them with the cylinder, make sure that the pistons have the right end gap. And we're gonna be doing a little deburring, and that should be a wrap for this one. All right, so basically what I got here, I got your standard oil ring, D&Js that came with the pistons that I got right here that I've already installed onto the connecting rods. So you have these 3 rings, which is like, this goes in the middle, just like I have it installed here. This one goes in the middle here. And then these 2, as you can see, go on either side. Now, I got this from a pretty good source that the oil ring on a street vehicle, not turbocharged, not boosted, or not boosted, not NOS it's not a NOS application. Basically, it cannot be less than 0.015 of an inch. So as long as it's not, I have a feeler gauge for 0.015, and the way that we measure this, basically I'm going to bring the oil ring in here, one of the little oil rings. Now I'm not just going to set it in here like this. I need to push it down about an inch, but since I got the oil ring already in this one, I'm going to bring it over here. I'm just going to push it into right about the oil ring, where the oil ring that I already have in there. All right? And so you'll see it just like this, yeah? All right, so then to check the end gaps in the piston ring, my feeler gauge first, it cannot be less than 0.015. I don't know if you can see that there, but basically I have 0.015 right there as my feeler gauge. It needs to fit in here nicely. And that's like butter. So this one's good. Take this guy over here. Square it up. Got squared up. Take my 0.15 feeler gauge. Alright. And I'm gonna put it in there. If it does not go, then I need to grind. See, now this one, I have to cram that in there. It doesn't really go. This one definitely needs to come down. So what I do is I come over here to my grinder. This is how it's set up. Now this ain't set up to be a piston ring grinder. Like I was saying, this is a saw blade sharpener, and it's got a diamond plate on there. As you can see, it comes installed with that. I didn't change that any blades. I just opened the box and this is the way it came. I plugged it in and I did this and I turned it on. Just that simple. Comes with another stuff over here. There's a little shield and all that, and I'm gonna put that in later maybe. I may have to modify it because you do have to hold some support. You can't just put it straight to it. So I'm gonna set the camera down, and you're gonna see me holding it. I'm gonna hold it with whichever side that's hitting the grinding wheel. I'm just gonna just a little kiss, all right, against the blade, just ever so slightly. I'm just basically seeing as how I only have to do maybe 0.003 inches that I need to take off of this piston ring. I'm only going to tap it just a couple times. All right, so let's see how that works out. All right, so basically what I did here with this, it's actually a circular saw blade sharpener. I already did this when I was videotaping it, but I guess it didn't record. So basically what I did is I went over there and I made sure I held the piston ring right here, and I only sharpened the one side over here on this side, and I just touched it. It looks like zzz, 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 maybe about 4 or 5 bumps. Make sure it's straight. And then I took sandpaper because I don't have, what you normally use is a file. I I just happen to have sandpaper. I don't have a fine file. I only got the coarse ones, which is not good for this. And what I'm doing is just taking off that little bit of metal, right, that has got burred up from the sharpener, because you don't want it to you don't want to put them in with burrs in there, because they'll scratch up, you know, the piston face as you're putting them in there. It'll scratch up the piston ring gland. What I'm going to do now, since I've already filed it down, deburred it, I'm going to take it over there to the cylinder and then check it out. I'm working on the number 4 cylinder with the number 4 piston with the number 4 piston rings. So I'm going to check this one in cylinder 4. 0.015 goes in there, and we're good to go. Remember, I'm not jamming this in here. So it goes in nicely. So we got it deburred, it's spaced out. This one's good for piston number 4. And I kept the pistons in order here and marked them. This one should be 4. Yeah. So this one should be 4. So I'm gonna put these in tomorrow. I'm not gonna put them all in today. But I do know that that's gonna go with that one. I've already put the oil ring in piston number 2. I wrote down 2 right there. And I got the oil ring in the gland right there, and they're spaced out 90. The end gaps too are spaced out 90 degrees from each other, meaning, so I have an end gap right here, or that top one, and then the bottom one, it's 180 degrees over here, right there where my thumb is. You can see that middle one, that's where that gap is. And then that top one's over there, and then bottom one is over there. Next thing I'm gonna work on is getting the rings all the way in, and then get to working on the crankshaft that's been sitting over there this whole time, and the camshaft, both, because I have to do similar things to those. So basically what I have to do to the camshaft and the crankshaft is I need to take my handy dandy caliper, measure all the lobes and the journals, and then make sure that they are not tapered or out of round. Some of the rod bearings and stuff that I've looked at, and the lifters, they signify more oil burning, but I haven't seen any excessive wear on the bearings themselves. So they didn't look in too bad a shape, what I thought they were going to look like, not as bad a shape as the Pistons did themselves. So it doesn't seem like any of the crankshaft is going to be tapered or out of round, but that's the reason why I'm going to go over with a fine tooth comb or a caliper in this case, so that I can double check to make sure that those measurements are within spec, they're not tapered or out of round. Then of course we're going to clean up the camshaft. I'm going to do some penny test on the crankshaft. I'll show you that. Some of you guys have worked around vehicles for a long time, probably have seen that method before. So that's going to be a wrap for today's video. Thank you guys for sticking with me for 30 minutes of this video. I know it's normally 20, but this one's 30 just because I had some exceptional things that happened, you know, with the vise over here, fashioning tools, getting these wrist pins out and get the new ones in, and then doing a little bit of installing the piston rings you can see back there, going back and forth from the Haynes manual. I'll tell you, it's been a rough couple of days getting this one done, but luckily we got all the new pistons in and I didn't break one single one. If you guys have any questions about anything that you want to see in the future, just make sure that you put it down in the comment section below. And also do not forget to like, share, subscribe if you have not already. I'd be glad to hear you guys' comments, and also I'd like to see like any content that I'm putting out that could help you guys. That's the reason why I'm asking if you guys want to go ahead and leave a comment. What you want to see, then maybe something that I'm putting in here can be somewhat beneficial to those that are watching it. But take care for now, and then we'll see you in the next one.